Opening Declaration, Westside Grace Ministries, Bishop Michael Anthony McDaniel, CSI, Critical Scripture Investigator, FBI, Forensic Bible Investigator, Senior Investigator, Westside Grace Ministries, Rightly Dividing the Word of Truth through Investigative Scripture Analysis, Definition of Pericope CSI Standard. A pericope is a self-contained unit of Scripture that contains a complete theological, doctrinal, prophetic, or narrative movement. In CSI investigative analysis, identifying the pericope establishes proper biblical scene boundaries to preserve contextual integrity. Case file, the Sadducees, the forensic analysis of materialism and fleshy desires, CSI biblical scene, identification biblical date, approximately 3033 AD. Physical location, Jerusalem Temple Precincts, the Court of the Gentiles, Royal Stoa. Human author, Matthew Levi, the former tax collector, customs official, primary audience, the nation of Israel, specifically challenging the religious establishment, literary genre, gospel, narrative, forensic discourse, biblical timeline, placement, the earthly ministry of Christ, the twilight of the Second Temple period, main focus, rebutting the denial of the resurrection and exposing the corruption of the priestly elite. CSI Step 1, grasping the text in their town, the biblical scene. In this stage of the investigative journey, we perform a forensic sweep of the Sadducean profile, the suspect profile. The Sadducees were the elite aristocracy. They controlled the Sanhedrin and the temple treasury. Unlike the Pharisees, they were political pragmatists who collaborated with the Roman occupiers to secure their own wealth. The motive, fleshy desires. Their fleshy desires were not necessarily the sins of the street, but the sins of the sweet paix. They sought power, prestige, and financial preservation. By denying the afterlife, they removed the internal affairs of divine judgment, allowing them to indulge in luxury without the fear of future accountability. The modus operandi. They used a reduced canon, the Pentateuch only, to argue that because Moses didn't explicitly mention the resurrection of the dead, it didn't exist. They weaponized intellectualism to protect their material interests. CSI Step 2, measuring the width of the river, the gap. We must identify the forensic obstacles between the first century Sadducee and the 21st century believer. The political gap. The Sadducees were a hereditary priestly class. Modern power players operate in a secular, globalized economy. The cultural gap. Their materialism was tied to the physical temple in Jerusalem. Today, materialism is digital, global, and decentralized. The covenantal gap. They were operating under a distorted view of the Mosaic covenant. We operate under the dispensation of grace. The primary barrier. The river is the denial of the supernatural. The Sadducees were the religious secularists of their day. CSI Step 3, crossing the principalizing bridge. What is the immutable truth discovered at the scene? The forensic principle. A heart fixed on fleshy desires and material security will eventually develop a theology that denies the supernatural to justify its own indulgence. If there is no next life, there is no reason to sacrifice in this life. CSI Step 4, MSM and apologetics elements. The trial. How do we defend this case against modern skeptics and the mainstream media narrative? The MSM narrative. The modern media often echoes the Sadducean spirit, claiming that religion is just a tool for social control or that only what can be physically proven exists. They paint the resurrection as a coping mechanism. The apologetic counterattack, the internal logic. Jesus uses the Sadducees' own evidence against them. In Exodus 3:6, God says, I am the God of Abraham. Jesus proves that God is not the God of the dead, but of the living. Logically, if the Sadducees believe Moses, they must believe in the resurrection. The forensic evidence of the resurrection, if the Sadducees were right and there was no resurrection, the early church, facing the same Roman and priestly persecution, would have had no motive to die for a materially dead leader. The existence of the church is the trace evidence that the Sadducees were wrong. CSI Step 5, Grasping the Text in Our Town, the application. The final stage of the investigative journey is the key field application. 1. Identify silent Sadducism. Do you live as if the material world is all there is? If your bank account, your comfort, and your social standing are your primary goals, you have moved back into the Sadducean derpy biblical scene. That 2. Cross-examine your desires. Are your fleshy desires dictating your doctrine? I don't believe in judgment, so I can live however I want. 3. The forensic verdict. The Sadducees thought they were the winners of history because they had the gold and the power. But when the temple fell in 70 AD, they vanished from history. Only those who believed in the resurrected king survived the transition into the new age. Conclusion. Do not be a materialist in religious clothing. The investigation proves that a life built on the fleshy is a life built on sand. Closing declaration, Westside Grace Ministries. Bishop Michael Anthony McDaniel, CSI, Critical Scripture Investigator, FBI, Forensic Bible Investigator, Senior Investigator, Westside Grace Ministries, rightly dividing the word of truth through investigative scripture analysis. Like, share, and follow this ministry. Copyright statement, copyright C 2026, Westside Grace Ministries, all rights reserved. Scripture quotations are taken from the CSI Investigative Framework.